My name is Average Joe, and I'm a proud geek with expertise in movies, superheroes, and animation.
My name is Beef Pork Ribs. I'm a fine repository of esoteric knowledge, which I suppose most people would qualify as geeky. Though I dabble in many fandoms, my main areas of expertise are anime, movies, and Belgian comics, with a strong recent insurgency of D&D.
Our mission is to bring nerd and geek culture to the masses
by sticking it all under the microscope.
Welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast.
Movies, comics, graphic novels, TV, cartoons, animation, nerds or geeks, entertainment culture. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power. Nerds and geeks, come gather around the scene. Come and join us in the Bat Jar. Come and tune into Average Joe and his team. Lots of room here in the Bat Jar. When the newest nerdy news drops, these podcast pals put it under the scope. DC, Marvel, Disney, Star Wars, cinematic, multiverse. It's mega Christmas, strangest franchise. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power.
Hello there, and welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast, where we put nerd and geek culture under the microscope.
Where we explore new things or old things in a new way, or new things that seem like old things, having fun with more Doctor Strange, which was, I guess, the purpose of last week's episode. But this definitely, I don't know, maybe I should not speak an opinion just yet and wait until we get Doomsdelay and other things out of the way.
Well, there's no Doomsdays or anything this week. This episode is fully dedicated to the first MCU movie of 2022, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
That is very exciting. This movie was different than what I thought, and mostly in good ways. I think that was exciting. That's not a spoiler yet, although I will say my Marvel fatigue is still, it's still there. This didn't cure it or anything, but it was a pretty fun movie.
Yeah, so let's actually start with the secret origin for this movie, because I think it's interesting. Like most things in Phase 4, it was announced at San Diego Comic-Con in July 2019, the fabled last Comic-Con in person, and at the time, what was announced was the title, which was Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and that Benedict Cumberbatch would come back, that Elizabeth Olsen would be in the movie as Scarlet Witch, and then they also announced that Scott Derrickson, who directed the first Doctor Strange, would return. So, this was pre-pandemic, pre-COVID. They had all their ducks lined up. It was originally scheduled to come out on May 7th, 2021. So it was going to be like Black Widow and Shang-Chi and Eternals, I think, would have all still come out before this. But of course, COVID happened. But even before the pandemic, this movie was already running into problems because in January 2020, the director, Scott Derrickson, stepped away from the project due to creative differences. And if you look at Scott Derrickson's filmography, I'd never heard of him before Doctor Strange, mostly because he worked on horror films. So he was very keen on bringing a more horror elements to the movie. And of course, they never tell us what these creative differences are. But it'd be curious. I'd love to find out, interrogate the guy and get the answers out of him.
Yeah, I remember talking to Mjolnir about that, and she was like, where it sounded like he wanted to make it more of a horror movie. And I'm like, okay, but why did they hire Sam Raimi if that was the creative difference? That seems a little weird.
Yeah, a month after Scott Derrickson left the project, it was announced that Sam Raimi, who some people may know from having directed the original Spider-Man trilogy, but arguably he's more well known for his horror movies like Drag Me to Hell and the Evil Dead series, was going to replace Scott Derrickson.
Also, as for this isn't really a spoiler until we get into more of it, but this movie definitely did feel more horror-ish than I expected it to. Not just based on it being an MCU movie, but also just based on the way it was marketed in the trailers. There was a lot more dark and randomly violent things than I was expected, which I'm sure we'll talk about more. On the whole, I was happy about it though.
Yeah, so if Scott Derrickson stepped away because he wanted to bring more horror to it, it would seem strange, no pun intended, that the movie ended up being what it was, because I feel like it was as PG-13 a horror movie as you could make a PG-13 movie.
Yeah, yeah, we'll surely we'll talk about it more, but I remember, I had a vague knowledge that Sam Raimi was the director who had picked it up, but I'd kind of forgotten when I was watching it. And then when his name came up on the credits, I'm like, "Oh, this explains so much." But apparently it was a toned down version of what was supposed to happen. I don't know. It was interesting.
So it wasn't made clear at the time, but when it was announced that the movie was going to feature Scarlet Witch, and they also announced WandaVision, there was this assumption that, oh, these two properties are going to connect somehow, because at that point, even with the original release date, I think WandaVision was still going to air before the Doctor Strange movie. And apparently there was a cameo that Doctor Strange was meant to have in WandaVision that was cut due to, I guess, the production schedule of WandaVision, most likely affected because of the pandemic. So that was one round of rewrites the movie had to have in order to explain the fact why Doctor Strange wasn't around in WandaVision, or rather their meeting point in the movie, it has to be different because he wasn't at all in WandaVision.
Yeah, the other thing, like, oh, this might be into spoiler territories, so
Yeah,
I
put
think
put a
we'll
pin
talk
on it.
about it. Yeah, we'll talk about it later. But I feel like there were other rewrites due to other things that happened after the announcement of this movie.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. I mean, for one thing, the release date of the movie changed 4 times or 3 times. It had 4 different release dates. It had its original May 2020 release date, which got shifted to November 2021 when the pandemic started. And then when Sony announced when Spider-Man No Way Home was going to come out, which was they originally released that, said that was going to come out in November 2021. They then pushed this one up to March 2022, and then at some point they then pushed it up to May 2022. And apparently at least one of these the March date was set because of the fact of when Sony decided to release No Way Home. And I have it on good authority that No Way Home had to be rewritten because of the shifting release date of Doctor Strange 2. Because there's a character who's introduced in this movie who was meant to have a role in Spider-Man No Way Home. And once you have that piece of information, all of a sudden Doctor Strange's actions in that movie make a lot more sense. It also makes sense as this isn't really a spoiler, but they don't really acknowledge the events of No Way Home very much in this movie, in Doctor Strange 2, I mean.
Yeah, but it wasn't that odd. Because I feel like the only person who would have knowledge of that would be Wong, and even there, they did kind of expressly try to make it so that Steven was trying to keep it away from Wong in No Way Home. So I think that wasn't that weird that they kept it away. Although the fact that both these movies had multiverses did make it weird that there was absolutely no mention of it. There should have probably been maybe a little bit, but I feel like, again, there aren't that many people who would have known, so it's mostly Steven not talking about it that's weird, not like people not being talking about it, except for that one thing that you put in the at the end of our agenda for the spoilers. But we'll get to that when we get in the spoiler verse.
So here we are. This movie has now come out in May 2022. It made $185 million its opening weekend, which means it is the second highest grossing film to come out since the pandemic started, falling only behind Spider-Man No Way Home. It beat out The Batman for the largest opening weekend of 2022. So it's doing very well. It seems like the audiences and the critics are they don't love it as much. Like, it's got a B+ cinema score, which is rare for Marvel movies. Usually it does better than that. And then even the Rotten Tomatoes critic score, it's only like 75%, which outside of Eternals, usually MCU movies do really well with the Rotten Tomatoes critic score.
Yeah, I honestly, I do think part of that is because of the way it was marketed. Like, not obviously not the critic score necessarily. I feel like the critic score is, I don't know. The critic score is lower than No Way Home. That's I don't know. I thought that like on a technical viewpoint, like I enjoyed No Way Home more as a spectacle, but I feel like on the technical level, this was a better movie. Um, but that might just, I don't know. Maybe I need more time to stew on it, and I've had that time to stew on No Way Home. But like, yeah, that does seem a little bit low. But I do think that the audience scores probably due in some part, if not in large part, to the, like, I don't know, the way that it was like, we've talked about some of the more horror aspects of it. That's not how it was marketed. It was marketed much more as like this is like, I expected this to be more similar to Spider-Verse than to Spider-Man, than the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man, which I think it's closer to the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man than Into the Spider-Verse for sure.
Yeah, it only has an 87% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, which again for MCU movies is fairly low. I think that's just an indicator it doesn't land with everybody.
Yeah, but I do think, and we're probably going to talk about that more, but I did talk to Mjolnir about that, and that is one of the things she did like about the movie, is that it wasn't just another MCU movie. Um, it had an outrageous amount of cameos, but like also, well, outrageous. It was also pretty restrained, considering it was like it is the first MCU multiverse movie. They could have gone a lot crazier than they did. So, that was okay. But I do think that, like, I don't know. I think it is mostly because I think if people had gone in expecting it to be a little more horror based and a little more gritty, and a little less quippy, they would have probably enjoyed it more. But I feel like people were expecting it to be kind of like quippy and fast and fun, more so than it was.
All right, let's just dive on in. Beeper, give us the Blu-ray case description for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
Doctor Strange, I always suspected this day would come. Because you always suspected this day would come. I'm ready.
On May 6th, nothing can prepare you for the mind-bending descent into madness.
This is the only way.
Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Rated PG-13. See it in premium large formats and IMAX.
In a world where apparently your dreams link you to other realities of you in other universes, Dr. Stephen Strange from the MCU universe, which is apparently 616, I don't know, it wasn't supposed to be, that's supposed to be the comics, whatever. Dr. Stephen Strange must help this girl who can travel between dimensions but only exist in one. Spoiler, apparently Scarlet Witch also wants that power so she can be with her boys. And they fight about that. And Doctor Strange must face his hubris, but not really, but kind of, in order to see if he can save the multiverse from Wanda, who's just really, really still grieving poorly, even though WandaVision was supposed to have gone through some of the grief.
Yeah, I was going to ask if that's a spoiler that Wanda is basically the villain of this, because the marketing doesn't really emphasize that. And
yeah, the marketing doesn't emphasize it, but like, I can't explain what happens in the movie without saying it, right?
No. It's fair. It's totally fair.
Yeah. You know what? I am starting to see how, like, we were talking about all the, like, pushbacks, and I'm like, yeah, no, this doesn't entirely gel with WandaVision or with No Way Home when I start thinking about it. Like, not that it's terrible, but like, I don't know. There was definitely a very different vibe at the end of WandaVision that kind of matches one part of the movie, but not overall where Wanda is going in this movie. So I don't know. I feel like that was a little strange. You're right.
Little strange. I like how you keep bringing his name back into it. I mean, I'll just start by saying this is not the movie I was expecting. I was expecting a movie where Doctor Strange was going to be like basically put on trial for previous crimes against the multiverse, and that he was going to be traveling between worlds. And I expected a multiverse of madness, like this kind of insane, like fever dream drug trip kind of experience that was going to really dive into the horror elements. Like I assume that's like he's going crazy through this experience. And the teaser trailer that they put at the end of No Way Home, kind of with the voiceover, it makes it sound as though he, like, because of what he did using that spell in Spider-Man, that it was going to be, and it was going to come back to bite him in the butt. And thought maybe it was his, like, the actions he took in the first Doctor Strange movie that were going to come back to get him. I thought maybe it was his gambit with Thanos that was going to come back to kind of bite him in the butt. And then it seemingly, this, again, not spoiling anything specific, but really the conflict that Doctor Strange has to experience in the movie doesn't really refer to any of those things.
Yeah, like, again, part of it I think is the marketing, but part of it is definitely, like you said, there were a lot of setups for why the multiverse would be happening. A girl with the power to travel between dimensions was not one of them and was completely unexpected. Like the movie also had a very different tone than what I was expecting. But even just, yeah, the general plot and plot device really that happened were so very different than what I expected. I will admit it kind of threw me for a loop. Like, but I think partially in a good way. Like, I can understand why people would have been off put by this, but personally I was okay with it because I was happy that this movie wasn't 100% predictable because I was expecting it to be 100% predictable. Um, there are some things that some people, oh god, yeah, the theater where I was, people clapped and were like, "Ooh," about certain things. I was like, guys, yes, this wasn't what I had expected to happen given the trailers, but like, it was really obvious this was coming. Like, yeah, I won't get into spoilers, but there's one thing that I was like, if you know anything about this, you knew this was coming.
Yeah,
But
so like I mean,
yeah.
I enjoyed the movie. I just want to get that out of the way, but I feel I have like a bad taste in my mouth because I feel like I was sold this idea that WandaVision and Loki and What If and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange 2 were all going to kind of be part of this shared storyline. And
Yeah, like
real in the end, you don't have to. I mean, WandaVision maybe, but I don't think you need to have seen Loki or What If or even Spider-Man to understand what's going on in this movie.
I was really weirded out. I don't know if this is a spoiler or not, but like not really because you kind of talked about it because you said Loki is relevant. I expected like even if it was just like, we talked about like Thanos when he showed up and says, "I guess I'll do it myself" to set up the Infinity Saga, like I expected Kang to just appear at some point somewhere, right? Like for at least an acknowledgement that he's the bigger villain of the multiverse that's kind of being set up, but he didn't. Instead, we got another potential source for conflict and villainy in the multiverse, except it really wasn't for some reason in this. And yeah, that was was kind of a weird thing. But again, I think that's a spoiler verse thing, so I
Yeah.
won't get into it right now.
Well, one piece of shared connection between this and the Disney Plus shows is that Michael Waldron, who wrote the Loki series, did write this movie. So there was at least some connective tissue there, and apparently they did like consult the director of WandaVision and Elizabeth Olsen on how to portray Wanda's character. So it's like they were all connected in that sense. And I've seen an interview with Kevin Feige where he tries to explain that the moment when Sylvie kills that one version of Kang, and then that creates the multiverse, is that basically they're saying like all these different universes that they see in this movie, the universes you interact with in No Way Home, kind of came into existence instantaneously once that happened. So I suppose it's still connected, but the
Yeah, but that's
multiverse.
also a weird one because you're trying to justify when it happened, but they were in a place outside of time, therefore it doesn't matter when it happened, it has always happened. So it could have happened then, it could have happened much later, it's irrelevant, right? If something happens outside of time, like you don't even necessarily need to show it on screen for it to have happened, right? It just kind of needs to exist at some point. All I'm saying is like even they could have still had that end to the Loki show, but like after this movie, and it would have made as much sense ish. Like people would have been upset that like, oh, why is this happening? But like since it's an event that happens outside of time, it doesn't matter.
Now, okay, so this is a multiverse movie, so it involves going to different universes, and you get to see actors play different versions of their same character. So I'm sure it was a fun movie to film because the actors got to do, different takes on the characters they're already familiar with playing. This is kind of old news to me because watching the Arrowverse, like the Flash was doing multiverse stuff as early as season 2, and even like they had a crossover where all the heroes were played Nazi versions of themselves in like 2018, and then they did the Crisis on Infinite Earths in 2019. So that element of this wasn't anything new for me, but I'm sure perhaps for people who are like just MCU fans, it was probably neat to see that, because even with Spider-Man, it's like they have different actors playing the different versions, so it didn't have the same effect, I suppose. That and even in Loki, I guess most of the variants were played by like other actors.
Yeah, and I think that like also even like it was a strange thing. I feel like What If would have been better to come after this. Like I know there
Really?
are like minor tie-ins, but again, it's kind of like what you said that this wasn't news to you. I feel like What If would have been better to come after this movie so that this was really like the first taste of multiverse in the MCU. Cuz even the multiverse in No Way Home, it's not really a multiverse. It's like the multiverse exists and a few of its members have landed here, right? It's the same thing as Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. We don't travel the multiverse comes to us. But this was traveling the multiverse, and I feel like it was, again, even though there's a few implicit tie-ins with What If, it wasn't really, it didn't work that well. Like I feel like What If would have been better to come afterwards.
Right. No, I think I'd agree with you. Actually, it isn't. It probably would have worked better because then it would have felt more new to the hardcore MCU people. There's a couple random things about the movie I noted when I was watching it. The first is that the Marvel Studios opening credits, it did show a lot more footage of Doctor Strange and Wanda. So I think it was trying to like, it seems like with every new movie they're trying to like adapt it a little bit just to kind of remind you of the times we've seen the main characters more.
I think it's just Marvel being self-indulgent at this point and being like, oh, look, we can customize our logo. Or maybe it's because they used to do that with the old logo where it was just the comic pages. Because I did actually end up watching Moon Knight this week, so we can do an episode on it. But anyways, they do that, right? When it's like still flashing just images from the comics, they are from the comics of the character that the show or the movie is about. But I don't know. I feel like it was a little bit over the top for that one, personally.
Fair enough. There's one actor who's listed in the main cast, and he's even presented as part of the main cast in the end credits. but he's in one scene in the movie. I'm like, who does this guy have to pay off in order to get top? Like, there's characters who have cameos in this movie who have more screen time than this guy. Did you notice that when you were watching the end credits?
No, I don't know who you're talking about. So
He's the guy that like sits next to Doctor Strange at the wedding.
Oh, yeah, that's true. You're right. Maybe he'll have another role. I don't know. I mean, I enjoyed him while he was on screen immensely. I thought it was hilarious and a great performance. But you're right. Yeah, that was barely a cameo.
The jump scares got me. There was at least 3 times I got jump scared because I'm pretty easy to startle anyway. But the movie was pretty effective, I think, in their use of those.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at anticipating jump scares. I think like the first one got me because I wasn't expecting there to be any in the movie, and there was another one that got me. But after the first one, I was pretty wary. But yeah, there was still another one that got me, and yeah, again, like we said, we weren't expecting this to be more of a horror movie, and it definitely was. And yeah, jump scares and like as you said, it says as horror as a PG-13 movie can be, like extreme violence just off screen. Like very well done. Like, yeah, I don't know. I know that's not the same thing as jump scares, but like there was like some things that were like, ooh, that like if the camera lingered for like a second longer on this shot, this would be an R-rated movie, but it
Yeah,
didn't.
yeah. Sam Raimi definitely brings his trademark horror genre sensibilities to the movie, and I think that does the movie a service of making it stand out among the MCU films, because people complain the MCU movies are all the same. So this one definitely had its own identity as like, oh, this is like the horror movie. I'm not a huge fan of horror movies, so I I didn't necessarily love those components myself, but I think it made this movie a more unique experience.
Yeah, and like it is one of the things that Mjolnir and I were talking about it. She really liked that they did different things and they were trying something different. And I think I agree with her. Like, this movie didn't feel just like an MCU. And like, we talk about it sometimes. It's like the MCU is at its best when it's doing something that is like a slightly different genre. Like when it isn't just a superhero movie, it's like, because a lot of people attribute the success of Winter Soldier to the fact that it was more like a spy thriller than a superhero movie, right? And I think this movie definitely was more of a horror movie than a superhero movie, and it worked well for it. Not as well as Winter Soldier, but still better than a lot of other movies in the MCU that were just a bit generic.
One of the things that you kind of touched on this, and that's what makes this confusing, is that they kind of introduced some rules for the multiverse here. And I don't know, it kind of took me out of the experience. I'm like, what? Like, this doesn't line up with how we've understood the multiverse up until now.
Okay, but again, Marvel has been changing its mind about how the multiverse actually works and what a multiverse is and how it's created and what the effects of those creation are every single time they mention it. So like maybe that's just people's understanding of what the multiverse is. And like, I mentioned this, like this isn't technically a spoiler, but like kind of more of a nitpick maybe, but like, and again, something Mjolnir pointed out, like 616 is supposed to be the comic continuity. It's not supposed to be the MCU continuity, but they referred to the main Doctor Strange as the 616 universe, and that is weird because it's basically saying that the comics exists in a different multiverse than the movies, which might be a smart move, maybe, because then you don't have to like bring in anything from the comic accurate. But at the same time, Marvel has been moving, and DC as well, but like people have been moving more and more towards comic accurate things. So it seems weird to do both of those things at once.
See, that's the kind of detail that didn't bother me in the slightest. I'm like, well, this is just very like it's just an entirely separate thing from the comics. This is their mainline universe, so naturally that's going to be what 616 is.
I
It's the same.
guess, but
It's the same way that like in the Arrowverse, the multiverse, how it's presented there, the universe where all the shows take place is Earth 1, and that's supposed to be like the main DC continuity.
yeah, but I get that, but also the base multiverse of DC and Marvel do work in very different ways as well, right? Which, when we get in the spoilerverse, we'll get into something else about that, because it is not just the way that they work, but the way they interact with each other is usually very different, right? And you're right, this did set up seemingly more similar things to a crisis situation than the way different multiverses of Marvel usually work together.
I guess the last thing I want to ask before we go into spoilers is like, does this title lie? Because to me, they actually spend more than 2 seconds in like one other universe in the movie, and I guess that's a spoiler. But to me, I don't think this movie lives up to its title. Like they should have given it a different name.
It depends what you consider the source of madness for Multiverse of Madness.
Okay, well, speaking,
I don't want to explain that until we're in the spoiler verse.
All right, well, speaking of multiversal travel and insanity, it is time to go inside the spoiler verse. So yeah, there'll be a time code where you can skip around this if you don't want any spoilers for Doctor Strange 2. So we're inside the spoiler verse now. Continue your thought.
Okay, so if the madness refers to the issue with multiverse traveling that both Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange are having, one because of magic, the other one just because of the inherent problem with doing it, then I think it works as a title. But I don't. But as you said, I do not think that's, again, the way it was marketed. Definitely wasn't that. And so, like, again, I don't think the title in itself lies. I think you can make an argument that madness comes to those who mess with the multiverse. But yeah, the way it was marketed and the way people generally interpreted the title and were led to interpret the title, it was a little bit of a lie. And it was kind of like, no, I wasn't into the multiverse. It was, there's madness within the multiverse in which you are.
Yeah, because they go to that like 848 universe where the Illuminati is, but then they don't really spend any time in the other universe.
Yeah. Also, like, so I'm sorry, because you mentioned that they were there and they had the Illuminati. Like, people in the theater seemed to be surprised when Charles Xavier showed up. Like, you can't have the Illuminati with Charles Xavier. He's like the most self-righteous, self-important person in the entire Marvel canon, except maybe for Reed Richards, and he was already there. Like you can't make.
There's casual fans who don't know that stuff, so it makes sense that they'd be surprised.
Really though. Look, the Illuminati is minimum Reed Richard and Charles Xavier, and then the rest of it is irrelevant because those two are the only people who think highly enough of themselves to always be in the Illuminati.
All right, before we get into that, I thought of you during the movie because very early on they established the difference between sorcery and witchcraft because they talk about runes, and I'm like, okay, is this going to make Beeper happy?
Ish. Except the problem is that it also kind of breaks the rules that were set up in What If for magic, in which the evil Doctor Strange was a lot more of a warlock. But like, I'm okay with it. Like, they are seeming to put a distinction between types of magic and how they work, so I guess that is something that's slightly nice, but it does, as I said, kind of contradict What If and definitely contradicts Thor, so it's kind of a weird one to have.
I was surprised when you said earlier that you didn't know it was a Sam Raimi movie. When Bruce Campbell shows up, it's like that's his thing. He makes cameos in Sam Raimi movies.
Yeah, I should have picked up on that, but I didn't. And yeah, no, I definitely when the post credit scene happened, I was like, "Oh, right, of course. I'm an idiot." But
That was really funny, like the way he like
oh
you
yeah.
know kind of copies the Evil Dead thing where he like looks in the camera and laughs.
Oh yeah, that was great. But also he's changed since the last time I've seen him in something. Like he's gotten older and
Yes, yeah, he has gotten
yeah.
older.
And I don't think I've followed his career closely enough to have recognized him at first glance the first time until he, I like, and I guess by the time the second post credit scene happened, I did know it was a Sam Raimi movie, so it kind of made more sense.
His voice is stuck in my brain because he was the voice of the tutorial in the first Spider-Man movie video game.
Okay, that makes sense.
Maybe the second one too, actually. But okay, so Wong is supposed to be the Sorcerer Supreme now. Did you feel like that he like underused him or that he was like underpowered for the for the title he's supposed to have?
Not really, because like again, he was a relatively new Sorcerer Supreme, and he still knew some information that Steven didn't, which was nice. And he had like kind of an authority that he doesn't. And there is like the one thing that WandaVision did establish very well is that the Scarlet Witch is going to be more powerful than the Sorcerer Supreme just by virtue of the type of magic she has that nobody else has, which I think was a good setup to make the Scarlet Witch more the Scarlet Witch and less Wanda Maximoff, like separating her from the older mutant Scarlet Witch, and kind of really focusing on real magic and reality altering powers, which I think was nice.
I'm kind of disappointed we never see the normal universe, the 616 version of Mordo in this, because he hasn't been in any of the movies since the first Doctor Strange, and that has a post credit scene where it sort of suggests that he's going to come back for Doctor Strange, and so the fact that we only see a variant version of him in this, I was very disappointed.
Yeah, but I think that also again plays into the whole we were expecting this movie to talk about something entirely different. I feel like again, given what that random incursion was, it was weird that he wasn't there. Sorry, it wasn't weird that he wasn't there because it had nothing to do with like anything Doctor Strange had done before. Like the plot device for multiverse travel is in fact just America. That's not the country, guys. It's the name of the girl who does portals to different universes. Like, so I thought, like, I see what you mean, and I do wish he had been there, but at the same time, he didn't really fit in this story. Like the only way he could have was if he like in a post-credit scene tried to usurp Wong because the order is weakened because of the attack that Wanda made, but like other than that, there wasn't really a way to fit him into the story as it is.
Right. I really enjoyed America Chavez in this. I know they're just continuing their trend of introducing Young Avengers characters, but apparently in the early versions of No Way Home, she was the one who cast the spell that went to Ray, and when you think of the whole No Way Home movie in light of the fact that it was never Doctor Strange casting the spell, it kind of makes more sense.
Yeah, and then it makes the tie-in with this movie less awkward. Okay. Yeah, that would have been interesting.
Yeah, some of the stuff with like Ned Leeds doing magic, like was supposed to be done by her originally.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I can see that. Well, but then
But
and then it doesn't have the like stringe of Ned is a wizard that we have to follow now because
or the
apparently you don't
Doctor
follow it
Strange is
all
an
that.
adult. Why did he make this dumb choice? Kind of thing.
Yeah, but I don't remember. Did we talk about this when we talked about No Way
We
Home?
did. We don't. Yeah, we don't have
Yeah,
to go
like
back to that.
it is still Doctor Strange, and he does still like to do things he's not supposed to do. And like
But
this movie kind of like I said in my thing, he does kind of come to face with his hubris, but kind of not, because he does actually, it works out for him in the end. But I do think they do make him be reluctant enough and push him into a corner enough so that it isn't like just obviously he's breaking the rules willy-nilly. There are like real consequences to him breaking the rules, and I think that was good.
last thing about America Chavez, it did bother me when initially it was kind of funny when she's like she's never heard of Spider-Man before, and they're trying to explain who Spider-Man is, but then when she said she'd been to 72 universes, and I was like, how in the world have you traveled to 72 different Marvel universes and not there's not a Spider-Man in any of them?
Well, she went to one where it was Spider Gwen, one where it was Spider Noir, uh, where
Oh, of
you
course,
see
yes.
they were just never, no, because she was confused about somebody having the powers of a spider too, so it couldn't be that. But yeah, that was a little strange, especially because like there's this weird thing where like all her portals at the beginning, like in most of the movie, her portals all bring people back to New York, even if they weren't in New York. Like most of the time they were in New York, but but one or two of the times they weren't in New York, and she still sent people to New York. So if she's been exploring New York in different places, which would make sense for her because she knew Doctor Strange in a different universe, even though it was a Spanish speaking Doctor Strange, like it means she's been in New York in 17 universe and never heard of Spider-Man.
Yeah, so Doctor Strange's kind of character arc in this, like he's constantly being asked the question, "Are you happy?" And you realize that he's like lying to himself, and he's like kind of like living in denial. And you discover that in every universe, Doctor Strange is kind of a guy who ultimately will kind of make it. He'll part from the group, and he'll just start to make his own decisions. And you're right, he doesn't. He kind of learns his lesson, but also he doesn't, because he still breaks the rules, but in a way that I guess like saves America's life.
But I do like that there was a conversation between, like a very short conversation between him and Wong, where Wong pretty much repeats what he had already told. Um, like it has a different connotation, because when he told it to Wanda, she had seen that in almost every other universe she is happy with her children, whereas Strange has seen the opposite, that in almost every other universe he is unhappy and isn't with Christine. But like, the idea that maybe somewhere one of us is happy is enough for me to be satisfied. And I think that was nice, because it was a callback to something Wong had said to Wanda earlier, which ultimately was part of what America showed Wanda to, air brackets, defeat her.
Yeah, it was funny. Like they talk a lot about the Steven Christine relationship in this movie, and I'm like, considering how that What If episode went, where they went all Steins Gate on us, I'm like, yeah, this is just a relationship that seems doomed to fail in every, no matter what setting it's in. So I'm kind of glad they've now introduced Clea, who I didn't know who that was when she showed up put me in the mid credit scene. I had to like Google her afterwards.
Okay. See, I thought it was oh, what's her name? The girl from New Mutants who has the little dragon.
No, it wasn't Magic.
Okay, cuz
It
I
was
don't know.
Charlize Theron. I don't know if you recognize the actress.
Oh, I yes, I did, but since these are different continuities, and, New Mutants, people will probably just pretend never happened, kind of like all the Fantastic Four movies, which was proven in this, because we did finally get to see John Krasinski as Reed Richards, and it's confirmed now. It's there. He's got a
Yeah.
beard.
Well, I'm hearing rumors that they're gonna save all the wacky multiverse callbacks for their Secret Wars thing they're going to do.
Yeah, that was a bit weird. Well, that is another thing that I know Mjolnir was talking about. It's like it was really weird for her, and like me, not as much, because I don't care about that part of Marvel as much, but I can acknowledge it is kind of weird seeing Reed Richard look somebody dead in the eye and say, "You are the greatest danger to the multiverse." Because, like, the Council of Reed is a thing. It's like, for people who don't know, the Council of Reed is basically the Council of Rick from Rick and Morty, but it's Reed Richards. And it's about as self-indulgent and as um destructive to people as a cancel of Rick Sanchez is. So like it was kind of weird that was a line in this movie.
Well, I mean, like the Marvel Illuminati is like it's never a good idea anyway, because you're right. It's a bunch of like the most self-righteous people in the Marvel universe who all also happen to hold like either great power themselves or positions of power that all kind of like they made the decision to send Hulk into space in the comics because they're like he's too dangerous.
And
So
ultimately also characters who have made really, really bad, difficult decisions that have destroyed universes at times. Like, yeah, because both Charles Xavier and Reed Richard have made mistakes that very often kill several, hundreds or thousands or just a few very important people.
just back to Clea for 1 second. I looked it up. She is the niece of Dormammu, and she eventually in the comics becomes Doctor Strange's wife.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
she
so
seems like an interesting character.
they're throwing Doctor Strange a bone in the MCU. That's nice. So I guess there may be happiness. Maybe he will be happy.
Now, okay, Wanda's arc in this movie, I was fine with it, mainly because when they go into her mind, you see that basically like normal Wanda is essentially under the influence of the book. Because if you just look at her actions on the surface, in light of what she went through in WandaVision, you would think this doesn't make sense. She worked through a lot of her grief. She would understand that what she's doing is wrong. But I think that scene, especially where you see like her normal self being kind of like shoved into that cave, it tells you that she's not in control of herself.
Yeah, I think it's kind of weird that Moon Knight came out like around this time because it definitely is without spoiling Moon Knight. If this is a spoiler for Moon Knight, you know nothing about Moon Knight, but it deals with somebody who has dissociative identity disorder and therefore multiple personalities within him, and it just seems weird that they still kind of did that for Wanda, even though it isn't. It is like essentially demonic possession from the book, but at the same time, the Scarlet Witch is the source of the book, so it is kind of her doing that. And it is kind of the Scarlet Witch taking over, but that was a little bit weird. And I kind of hope that they do. I hope they go into it, but without making it a Dark Phoenix kind of thing, where like the Phoenix just is possessing people sometimes,
That's
because you
kind of what it
definitely
feels
could
like,
go that
actually.
route.
You make that comparison. I think that's basically what it feels like.
Yeah, especially when Charles is the one going into her mind to find it out. But I hope they make it a little bit more that it like Wanda is a little bit more in control or a little bit more there than just like Wanda and Scarlet Witch. But I mean, but the arc of her character, yeah, I think it like I guess it does kind of work because the witch is taking over, but at the same time, if she's being possessed by the book, she is still acting out of her grief still, and that's still that is a little bit weird. And again, the end of WandaVision very much seemed to imply that she was going to control her power properly, the way she appears at the beginning when Strange goes to talk to her, as opposed to her going kind of crazy because of the book. Like I felt that was like, I understand what you're saying, that the possession makes it a little less weird for her character arc, but it does seem like she's in a completely different place than she was at the end of WandaVision.
Well, I don't know if it does, because the very last thing you see is that she's using the dark book to try and find a way to like get back to her kids. Like where we see like a projection of her just like sitting in the front porch, like seemingly like a normal person, and then you cut to her in like reading the dark book trying to find a way to get back to her kids. So this is clearly the end result of that she's discovered that she just needs to go to
she has the Kingpin's motivation from Into the Spider-Verse. She like basically wants to be reunited with her multiversal variant version of her family, and she's willing to do whatever it takes to get to that, essentially.
Yeah, but again, it's weird that she's gone into that all or nothing. That is a lot less characteristic of her than somebody like Kingpin, where the ends justify the means is like his middle name.
But she's under the influence of the book, right? Like it's not just her anymore. That's what I'm trying to. That's how I rationalize this. It's not like she wouldn't like Wanda and her normal self, even in her grief, she wouldn't go around killing all these people just for the sake of like being reunited with her kids. Like that's the influence of the book kind of making that happen, and hence why she's willing to like seemingly kill herself at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's. Yeah, I don't. I mean, it's the Marvel universe. Nobody ever dies, but also, I feel like she's not dead. But also, and again, this is something that is a little intriguing when you start thinking about it. Like, she's really the only Wanda Maximoff who became the Scarlet Witch and who lost her children. Like, again, like they keep repeating, those aren't real children. And like, it is a little strange also that she can't find a single reality in which she's still with Vision either. Like, because that seems like something that wouldn't always happen, right? Especially if in so many universes, those are the children she has with Vision, right? And yes, they were created by her and they have the power of her and her twin brother and, everything like that. But still, like, like, does Wanda always imagine these children even if she gets married to a normal person? Or is she married to Vision in all of them, and in all those universes, Vision is always killed? Like, it seems a little strange.
I wonder if it's like maybe it's the book has influenced her to make her believe that like this is the way the multiverse is actually laid out, and there are universes where Vision's alive or they have different kids or whatever, and they're just telling her it's like every universe except the one you're in, you're living with your sons, and that's again like manipulating her into like taking action.
Yeah, but then again, it is. I don't know. If I am the Scarlet Witch and I'm trying to take over the multiverse, wouldn't I want to reach out to the other Scarlet Witches in the multiverse that have mastered this, right? Because again, the spell book she's being possessed by are spells that were rewritten from the original spells that the Scarlet Witch wrote on the walls of the temple of the throne room where she lives, right? So it seems a little odd that if that's their grand design, why wouldn't they try to unite together?
Anyway, hopefully they'll expand upon this more in her next appearance. But let's talk about the Illuminati. Yeah, the big cameo fest. I mean, we obviously like. I mean, yeah, the twin trailer you hear Patrick Stewart's voice, so it's like okay, it's pretty obvious that he's here. But what I wasn't expecting was him to look exactly like the version of the character from like the 90s comics and the animated series, and to have the 90s music come in as he's coming on screen. That was super cool.
Yeah, like I do understand it was dramatic, but at the same time, like, yeah, of course Charles Xavier is part of the Illuminati. He basically is the Illuminati. Like I mean, like, depending on where you're going, but normally Charles Xavier, Omega level mutant, could take over the entire Illuminati if he wanted to too. Like, that none of them are wearing masks. Well, one of them was wearing kind of a helmet-ish thing. He was an Inhuman character, right?
Yeah, so that's the same actor who played Black Bolt on the Inhuman show.
Oh, okay. I wasn't.
I was genuinely surprised they brought him back because like I know in the comics Black Bolt's part of the Inhumans, but considering how poorly received that Inhuman show was, I'm like, if they do
Yeah.
include Black Bolt, they're not going to bring back that guy, but they did. They brought him back, and I was like, well, good for you. You get another kick in the can at like reprising a role. And
Yeah, but then again, maybe because they were expecting to kill him right away. that's why. And now they're going to forget about Inhumans again.
Yeah, and I mean, the one loose tie-in to What If is that Captain Carter's there. And I don't know, I was
It's not the only tie-in. There's also the rainbows in the sky of that universe, and the fact that there are Ultron sentries, that the sentries are clearly Ultron bots, is also a tie-in because you did have the rainbow in the skies in the planets that the multiversal Ultron was looking at. So there
oh,
were
okay, I
tie-ins
didn't
there too.
I didn't catch that, but I'll just say Captain Carter, I guess making her live action debut, I was kind of underwhelmed. She didn't seem to have the same. I mean, I understand animation versus live action. She didn't have the same fight moves.
Yeah, but again, I think that, and I remember like Mjolnir specifically pointed this out in the movie. Was like, it's too bad that this wasn't her first appearance because it would have been a lot better if it had been. And
You
again,
think?
I think What If could have been afterwards, and it would have been better for that reason too. That like having her, show up in live action, having the same actress, because again, and I think some of it does also go down to the fact, or come down to the fact that not all the actors who voice acted for What If were good voice actors, and like I don't know, it felt a little weird.
It was cool seeing Maria Rambeau as Captain Marvel because that's like one multiverse thing that would make sense. Like if she was the one who, got hit by that blast of Kree energy instead of Carol Danvers. So I mean, she was neat. And then yes, John Krasinski. I was genuinely surprised to see him there. I thought it was going to be like Ian Grufford from the original Fantastic Four movies in there, but and it's especially interesting now that the new Fantastic Four movie doesn't have a director, and the fact that John Krasinski has directed movies in recent years. You kind of wonder if they're like trying to like pitch it to him as like, oh, you can direct and star in this movie, like get paid twice as much.
Maybe. I actually hadn't thought of that. But that is true. That could happen, and he is a decent director. But I mean, it's also like you got to tread gently because all like the Fantastic Four movies have generally done poorly. It's not like the X-Men movies have been hit or miss, and the third one is always terrible, or like the Spider-Man movies, have like variable things. Like, it is very like Fantastic Four movies are all pretty bad, generally speaking. So like, it's and the old TV show was also super campy and not great. So like, it is, it is kind of a interesting thing, and like especially if you have a multiverse and if you start bringing in bigger villains, like Reed Richard is kind of important. And like, especially again, now that they've taken Tony Stark out of the equation and Richard Reed isn't just another brilliant scientist, like he can come up as what he is, which is the most intelligent man on earth.
Back to Professor X. Even the way he uses powers, like you saw the little waves radiating from his mind, I was like, that's so like X-Men comic Professor X. So he just felt much more like a comic book version of Professor Xavier than, it felt like less he was reprising his role from the movies and more so like kind of bringing that character from the pages. Also, I thought it was interesting in the end credits when they're going through the music, they reference it as the X-Men 97 theme, which I guess they're associating the theme song with the revival that's going to go on Disney Plus, less than the like original show that the theme comes from.
Yeah, well, maybe it was a slightly different theme, and they used that one. Like there's like the variation. Maybe I don't know, but I think so. But at the same time, it's still Patrick Stewart playing the role. It is still the same person in some ways. Like, and I think also like he does still act in a way that he uses his brain, and there's waves coming out in the other movies. It's just more subtle. But I mean, why would he need to be subtle? He's the head of the Illuminati.
Yeah. Okay, I don't know how you felt about this, but I thought it was incredibly lame how easily Wanda killed them all.
Yes and no. Like,
Uh,
I understand. I think the I think it actually would have been better if she would have done it faster.
Okay, well
Like,
here's something that bothered me. There's 4 people she encounters, 2 men, 2 women. She like instantly kills the 2 men and then somehow struggles to kill the 2 women.
yeah, especially considering that, well, I don't know, in the hierarchy of straight power, out of those 4 people, I think that actually Captain Marvel, sorry, not Captain Marvel, Captain Carter and Reed are definitely the 2 weaker ones. Um, but yeah, it is strange that she does dispatch Charles Xavier very quickly, but also it was so odd to me because I felt like that was a great chance to have the like mutant tie-in for Scarlet Witch and be like, well, no, she is actually a mutant in some universes, so why not just have him talk to her as Wanda Maximoff, as the daughter of his best friend? I thought that was really unfortunate that they didn't do that because I think that would have justified him being distracted, and I would be more okay with him dying quickly if that was the case. But I agree, she should have been able to dispatch, like, at this point she's like more or less full control over reality. She should have dispatched all 4 of them as easily as she did Reed Richard, especially Captain Carter. Like, why didn't she just explode her or make her disappear? Like, yeah, that made very little sense.
Yeah, and I hate to be like, that guy, but you can't help but wonder. It's like, oh, like, why kill off the male characters as quickly as possible and then allow for more of a fight scene between the female characters?
Yeah, I mean, there is an aspect of that, but also, like, again, I think Captain Carter was the problem in that because Captain Marvel holding off against her longer makes sense.
Oh yeah, I
And like
agree.
I said, the approach that Charles took to try to help her wasn't necessarily the best. So I can see why that didn't necessarily work. But you're right. There is a little bit of that, but I do like that she didn't also immediately completely overpower America either or find them instantly. But at the same time, that did seem a little strange again that her, like, there was a lot of variability in her power at that point. Like, she took out the Illuminati almost instantly and then a door was a problem. I think that Wong was the most underrated character in the movie. I thought he was great. He filled his role really well. And like his insight as well as like his role and what actually got him to help the Scarlet Witch and how he was trying to make a difference were really cool and well done. Um Also was not, look, can we talk about a few horror things was not expecting? I was not expecting zombie Doctor Strange with wings made out of demons. Like, that was a sharp turn. As well as like, yeah, some of the more gory, almost gory aspects of it, I really liked. And maybe that's why they had the scene go on a little bit longer, because of the way that she does ultimately dispatch Captain Carter was a very horrorish and horrible way to die. So I think you can not justify it, but excuse it a little bit because that was an amazing shot and very, very Sam Raimi.
So coming around to final thoughts, I had a hard time believing it had been 6 years since the last Doctor Strange movie. And I think that's in part because the MCU has been very good at finding ways to make him an important part of other movies, particularly the way he's involved in the events of Infinity War and No Way Home. You'd have a hard time believing it's been that long since he had his last solo movie. And he didn't have a whole lot of character growth in any of those films, so it was kind of nice to like kind of put him front and center again. I think the fact that it was basically a supernatural horror movie kind of gives it its own unique flavor. It's just probably not a flavor I would go back and have again. I'm glad I saw it. There's maybe certain parts of the movie I'll rewatch in the future, but as far as I'm concerned, it's fine. It's good. It's not. I don't find it great though, so I'm gonna give it 3.1 out of 4 bat cookies.
I think for the first time, the magic in the MCU feels like magic, and that was nice. Yeah, it wasn't what I was expecting. I think I like Sam Raimi as a director and his flavor of horror and humor probably more than you do. But generally, I'm not a fan of horror, but I do like Sam Raimi movies. So I enjoyed it. I will probably see it again, but probably not super often. I'm gonna put it at a 3.3. I think it wasn't amazing. There were a few problems with the tie-in, but I also think that as a standalone movie, it holds a lot better than I thought it would, especially considering it was a multiverse movie, and I think that's to be applauded.
So, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is now in theaters. So, if you liked what we said about it, go check it out.
If you want to reach the show, you can send us an email at
batjarpodcast@gmail.com.
or you can tweet us at
The Bat Cookie Jar.
You can find the Bat Jar Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, because we got a channel. Share our posts on Facebook, write reviews, give our shows a rating. This will help all people join us inside the Bat Jar, and we appreciate it dearly.
We previously decided that next episode will be about Moon Knight. So all the 6 episodes are available for streaming now on Disney Plus. I have not watched any of them yet, but I've had so many people tell me, "Oh, you gotta watch it." So it's probably
I
not going to
think-
be good for me.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm gonna say I was surprised, but this might currently be my favorite MCU show right now.
Okay, well, I've got a week to catch up. So come back to the Batchar podcast next week when we talk about Moon Knight. And until that time, I'm Average Joe.
I'm Beef Pork Ribs.
Catch you on the flip side.
Eddie! I mean, Mark!